Weezer's Encore.
Cool.
The stories behind the songs.
Thank you.
Here's iHeartRadio's Myles Galloway.
Hip, hip, I'm Myles Galloway, and this is the story of Weezer's Island in the Sun. How do we determine what the biggest song is in an artist's catalogue? A few decades ago, it was generally decided based on sales and airplay, but then along came digital downloads, followed by YouTube views, and finally, streams across the various platforms out there. Apps like Spotify and TikTok have completely revolutionized what constitutes an artist's most popular song simply by letting the algorithm do its thing. As such, virtually any song in an artist's catalogue can at some point become their greatest hit. A band like Weezer is a good example of this, considering they've had multiple hits throughout multiple decades, but chances are different fans have different ideas of what song is considered their biggest. Is it Buddy Holly, their 1994 breakout with the mind-blowing award-winning music video directed by Spike Jonze? Or maybe it's Beverly Hills, the gimmicky earworm that's divided Weezer fans for 2 decades now. How about their more recent cover of Toto's Africa that became a surprise chart topper? Or perhaps it's Island in the Sun, the laid-back jangle pop song that's become a beloved anthem and streaming sensation over time. Well, I'm about to tell you just how the latter became the most successful tune Weezer has ever written. How about we start off with a fun fact about Weezer? In the very early days before they'd settled on a name, the previous iteration of the band was called 60 Wrong Sausages. Yep, lucky for them, and well, just about everyone, that version of the band and its name didn't last very long. In fact, they endured many name changes before deciding on Weezer. A few years before that, frontman Rivers Cuomo was the lead guitarist in a heavy metal band called Avant-Garde. They had formed in high school in Mansfield, Connecticut, where Rivers spent his teenage years. In 1989, when Rivers was only 19, Avant-Garde relocated to Los Angeles to see if they could make it amongst the booming hair metal scene happening on the city's infamous Sunset Strip. Avant-Garde quickly changed their name to Zoom, but that didn't really help matters. The band was going nowhere and eventually fizzled out. I must point out that there are images of both Avant-Garde and Zoom online that I highly recommend searching out. Seeing Rivers Cuomo with a head full of long metal hair sprayed and teased to the max is highly entertaining. But trying to be the next Motley Crue wasn't in Rivers' cards. Around the same time, he also flunked out of the Guitar Institute of Technology where he was attending school. He enrolled at a couple of different colleges in the LA area and began working at Tower Records, where he would meet a guy named Pat Finn, who would help introduce him to older acts like the Beatles and Beach Boys, as well as new ones like Pixies and Sonic Youth. It was hearing Nirvana's Silver at work one day that really grabbed him and inspired him to take his music into a different direction. He'd tell Rolling Stone, "It's like, oh my God, this is so beautiful to me, and I identify with it so much." Hearing him and sing about Mum and Dad and Grandpa Joe, these personal family issues in a really heartbreaking kind of innocent childlike way over these straightforward chords in a major key. But then the distortion kicks in and he starts screaming, "Shit, that's what I want to do." And so Rivers started writing his own songs with no real design for what to do with them. Pat Finn then introduced Rivers to Patrick Wilson, a drummer who played in a band with Finn called Bush. No, not that Bush, with Gavin Rossdale. They didn't exist yet. The two hit it off and began jamming together, eventually forming a band they called Fuzz with bassist Scotty Chapman, future cast member of Discovery Channel's show Mythbusters, but she wouldn't last long. Patrick would tell Rolling Stone, "She realized we were idiots. Rivers and I had a lot of facility on our instruments, and she was like, these guys are nerds." We were totally nerds. Rivers was smart enough to realize I need to not look like a nerd. I never really gave a shit. I just wanted to play. Fuzz sounded somewhere in between Jane's Addiction and Soundgarden, with Rivers on lead vocals and guitar, but they didn't last. Instead, he and Patrick brought in Finn and hippie punk Jason Cropper to form 60 Wrong Sausages. Oh yes, that name again. That band played one show and existed more as a collective before they broke up in late 1991. Rivers was determined to succeed, though, and focused on writing songs for whatever his next band would be. But he refused to do anything with them until he had amassed 50 in total. At the same time, he also recorded a secret rap album under the name Vegeterrorists in the style of Public Enemy about his commitment to a vegetarian lifestyle. These songs, however, have never seen the light of day. Gee, I wonder why. It wasn't until Patrick met Matt Sharp while they were both working at a tanning salon supplier that the seeds of Weezer would be planted. Patrick gave a demo of Rivers' songs to Matt, who immediately heard potential. He would tell the LA Times, "It was the first time someone I knew created something where I thought, my God, this is something I'd listen to even if I didn't know them." Matt insisted on becoming their bass player and band manager, which gave Rivers the confidence to put together a band to play these songs. He also encouraged Rivers to avoid the grunge sound, which had taken over alternative music at the time, and instead they decided to follow a different path, closer to home. They agreed to make music like the Beach Boys, only louder. Rivers' girlfriend also convinced him to cut off his long metal hair, which according to her would make him cuter. And boy did it. Here's Rivers telling Kelly Clarkson about cutting off his long hair.
When did you end up cutting it?
It was a year into Weezer, actually.
Yeah.
It was very hard to cut it. I was so attached to it.
Yeah?
Growing up in the 80s, that's all musicians had long hair. And
Yeah.
that's how you knew you were a rocker.
Now with Rivers on guitar and vocals, Patrick Wilson on drums, Matt Sharp on bass, and Jason Cropper on rhythm guitar, the band was complete. But they needed a name, because 60 Wrong Sausages wasn't going to cut it. The band's official birthday was on February 14th, 1992, Valentine's Day, when they had their first practice as a foursome in the garage of the house they rented. A month later, they were ready to play their first show, but they needed a name. Rivers came up with Weezer when he was booking the show, a name he'd previously used on a label for a cassette of his songs. Here he is telling Conan O'Brien on the Team Coco podcast where the name came from.
And the band is named, it's a nickname that you had as a kid?
Yeah, that's what my dad called me when I was very young. I asked him, "Why'd you call me Weezer?" And he said it was after the kid in The Little Rascals. There was a character named Weezer.
Oh, yeah.
Was there a Weezer?
Yeah,
Was there was like a Froggy for a while, and he probably grew too old, and they put in Weezer or something like that.
Yeah.
Always needed
Yeah.
a weird-sounding kid or something.
Wow.
But
Weezer's first gig took place in March 1992 at Raji's on Hollywood Boulevard in Los Angeles. They managed to find a spot on a bill with another up-and-coming band called Dogstar. Now, if that name rings a bell, that's because their bassist was way more famous than the band itself. His name, Keanu Reeves. Unfortunately for Weezer, they played after Dogstar, and after all of the Keanu heads left, at 1 o'clock in the morning, Weezer played to a total of 5 people, all friends of the band. Now, even though it wasn't exactly a memorable experience for Weezer, Keanu Reeves sees it differently. Here he is remembering that night with Yahoo's Lindsay Parker.
I want to go back to the golden age of the 90s and the genesis of, or the beginning of Dogstar, because the first ever Weezer gig was with you. You opened for Weezer at Raji's. Now that's history. That's LA history right there. I need to know memories of what it was like. And it's a basement. It's a dive.
Oh, that's history for us, but I don't know if that's for them.
Nice one, Keanu. Weezer would continue to play shows around town, but the audience wasn't getting any bigger. Feeling discouraged by their inability to build a fan base, Rivers put the onus on Matt to find the band a record deal. He gave him a deadline of 9 months, otherwise Rivers would go back to school. They dusted off an old song by Rivers from his days in avant-garde called Renaissance, which he reworked and retitled Say It Ain't So. That song, along with another called Undone, the Sweater Song, made it onto a demo called The Kitchen Tapes, which they passed around to labels. The tape made it into the hands of Todd Sullivan, A&R at Geffen Records, who was intrigued enough to catch their next gig. Sullivan would tell the LA Times, they weren't a tremendous live band by any means, but there was this feeling that they had their blinders on and they knew what they were going for. And the songs, Say It Ain't So was incredible. I could kind of connect the dots. Weezer started to generate some interest from labels and in June 1993 signed a rather modest deal with DGC Records, home to cool alt-rock bands like Nirvana, Sonic Youth, and Hole. Initially, they'd planned to produce the album by themselves at their home, but Todd Sullivan and the label quickly persuaded them to work with a producer, at least for their first album. After considering a few lesser-known names, Rivers inquired about Rick Ocasek, frontman of The Cars, after hearing their hit, Just What I Needed, while he was grocery shopping. He could hear something in The Cars' music that he wanted his own music to sound like, so they sent Rick a demo and he liked what he heard. He would tell Rolling Stone, the demo is just a thick slab of mud with some music mixed in. It was so fucking great. The Cars singer was all in to produce the band's album, so he jumped on a plane to LA to meet them and see them jam in their space. Here he is telling Bob Coburn on Rockline about the first time he saw them play in person.
I, received demo tapes from them and heard them and loved those. I went to Los Angeles to meet them. I had no idea what they were going to look like or sound like. And I went to a rehearsal hall, place that was about as big as a kitchen. And they just whacked it up to 11 and played the songs. And I was pressed like those ads, for those speakers where you're, everything goes back,
Oh, yeah, they were rants, I believe, yeah.
But it was a wonderful experience, I have to say.
In their first visit to Toronto, Patrick Wilson and Matt Sharp told Much Music's Simon Evans what the experience was like working with a legend such as Rick Ocasek.
Okay, how did you find Rick? Or did he find
Rick
you?
a tape.
Right.
Rick heard that tape.
Yes.
And said, that's a darn swell tape you got going.
You got a good tape there.
You got a nice little tape. And then he came to a rehearsal 2 days later and said, I like your band.
You and me.
He said, babe.
He said you and me.
He said, babe.
Did he say babe?
Destiny.
All right. Was the tape a lot like this album, or did he say, no, what you should do is...
so bad.
Was it?
Yeah,
I don't know how
bad.
he even heard anything good out of it, because it was just
it was recorded poorly.
Yeah.
He's listening.
Yeah.
Like it's...
Sorry.
It's okay. It's okay.
kind of true, though.
Yeah.
It just didn't sound very good.
So he sort of whipped Weezer into shape then? Would this be...
No, he just let us do what we wanted to do,
He just said...
He kept the record company away from us.
And he said, I'm the man and I'm going to give you the tools.
At Rick's request, they would record the album at Electric Lady Studios in New York City, so he could be at home close to his wife, supermodel Paulina Porizkova, with the couple's first child at the time. While they were preparing for the studio sessions, Rivers and Matt put a lot of emphasis on improving their vocals, taking inspiration from barbershop quartets and honing their abilities to sing in falsetto. With Rivers singing lead and Matt singing backup vocals, they were able to bolster the band's chemistry just in time to enter the studio. The harmonizing would come in handy for a song Rivers had written called Buddy Holly, but he was planning to save that one for Weezer's second album. He and Matt both thought it was a bit too cheesy and something that would make them appear more as a joke band. However, Rick loved Buddy Holly and insisted they try to work on it for their debut. Matt would tell Blender magazine, we thought Buddy Holly was a novelty. We were leaning toward not including it at all, but Rick said we'd be stupid to leave it off the album. We'd come into the studio in the morning and find these little pieces of paper with doodles on them. We want Buddy Holly. The song became so popular in the building that the engineer claims to have heard the studio receptionist humming it to herself. Things seemed to be going well for Weezer while recording their album, except for one thing. Jason Cropper had to go. Band members described his vibe as weird and his behavior at times as erratic, which may have had to do with his girlfriend revealing that she was pregnant. Despite contributing the guitar riff in the intro to My Name is Jonas and recording all of his guitar parts, Jason was asked to leave the band. While there was an urgency to replace him, Rivers re-recorded all of Jason's guitar parts himself in just one take, which is what appears on the album. In an interview with Wheeze Talking Wheeze to the podcast, Jason said his split from the band was handled professionally by Rivers.
I remember there was a conversation that Rivers and I had after, I had left the band, and he said to me something like, we're going to replace all your parts, and, don't be upset about it. It's still going to be a good record, and, you're still involved with us, because you've played a part in the band, and we're, let's just, remain, friends and kind to each other, and, we'll have we'll take care of you or whatever if we're doing well, and, we'll be, fair. And I couldn't complain. I mean, I was at home with my, newly born first daughter, Kiefer, who, I'm still very, very close with to this day. We talk every day. And I was just like, what could I say at that point? It's like, it's his band. It had always been his band. And that was something.
Jason would receive a writing credit on My Name is Jonas, despite none of his actual playing appearing on the album. The band hired Brian Bell as their new guitarist, even though they'd never heard him play before. Essentially, Brian was hired because of his looks, but as an audition, Weezer had him overdub guitar parts of the band's songs and tell them his favorite Star Wars action figure. In case you're wondering, it was Momo Nadon, better known as Hammerhead. Apparently that's all it took. Weezer were officially a band ready to introduce themselves to the world. Weezer's self-titled debut album was released on May 10th, 1994. Even though Brian doesn't appear on the album, he is credited with playing guitar. But maybe it was his look that made the band want to include him on the album. Thanks to its vibrant, minimal cover featuring 4 studious-looking guys standing next to one another, it would earn the nickname The Blue Album and go on to become one of the more iconic album covers of the 90s. Its first single, Undone, the sweater song, was originally perceived as a joke song, thanks in part to the Spike Jonze directed music video in which the band perform in one continuous take against a blue backdrop, only to be disrupted by a bunch of dogs that quickly take over the set. But Rivers meant for it to be a sad song, inspired by his interest in the Velvet Underground. Only years later would he admit to Rolling Stone that Undone was almost a complete rip-off of Metallica's Sanitarium. The video became a buzz-bin hit on MTV, and the song ended up peaking at number 57 on the Billboard Hot 100. While Weezer were beginning to build an audience, they released their next single, Buddy Holly, in September 1994. Again, they made the music video with Spike Jonze, but this time, it would change everything. Based on an idea Jonze pitched the band, the video featured Weezer performing on an episode of the popular 70s sitcom Happy Days. Using some clever editing techniques and camera work, the director magically made it appear like the band were inside the show, performing for the cast at the local hangout, Arnold's Drive-In. Original Happy Days cast member Al Molinaro even reprised his role as the drive-in's owner and cook for the video. The video became an instant sensation, and had YouTube been around in the mid-90s, it would have gone viral and likely reached 1 billion views, though as of right now, it sits at only 78 million. Still impressive. Buddy Holly became an unexpected crossover hit for Weezer, who, if you remember, weren't sure about even including the song on their album. Brian would tell the Toronto Star, "We saw our audiences change from intelligent, hip-looking people to complete jocks who just came because they saw the video. That's the price you pay if you want to make a living at this." Buddy Holly reached the top 20 in the US and UK and went as high as number 6 in Canada. At the 95 MTV VMAs, the video was nominated for Video of the Year, but won 4 awards altogether: Best Alternative Video, Breakthrough Video, Best Direction, and Best Editing. Another single would be released the next year, the fan favorite Say It Ain't So, which has gone on to earn more streams than any other song on the album. I think a lot of it has to do with them playing hacky sack in the music video, because who doesn't love to watch a good circle kicking? The Blue Album would go on to become the band's most successful album, selling more than 15 million copies to date. But as Matt would tell Much Music's Jennifer Morton, Weezer had zero expectations for their debut album.
People would always say, "Well, this is your first record, aren't you excited because you have a chance at selling lots of records?" And we just figured there was no chance in hell that we were going to be successful anyways. But I mean, it's just not. That was never really a thought for us. It wasn't this big rock star dream. It was more just we're just this garage band and we play. And we were pretty amazed that somebody even wanted to put out our songs at all.
In less than a year, Weezer would become one of the most beloved alternative rock bands on the planet, thanks to their nerdy charm and power pop hooks. And while they were on top of the world, Rivers was already planning the next steps, a space rock opera titled Songs from the Black Hole. Inspired by the opera Madame Butterfly and musicals such as Jesus Christ Superstar and Les Miserables. Rivers wanted to put a narrative to his music to help express the doubt he was feeling over becoming famous so quickly. He would tell LA Weekly, after we put out the Blue album, I had a huge inferiority complex about being a rock musician. I thought my songs were really simplistic and silly, and I wanted to write complex, intense, beautiful music. But as he was writing new music, Rivers had extensive surgery to lengthen his right leg, which had been shorter than his left leg since birth. This required grueling physiotherapy and hospitalization to assist with his rehab, and he was forced to use a cane and use painkillers to cope. He also applied to Harvard University to study classical music, something he'd become obsessed with. In his application letter, he detailed the depression that came from his year of experiencing highs and lows of being in Weezer. He wrote, "You will meet 200 people every night, but each conversation will generally last approximately 30 seconds. Then you'll be alone again in your motel room, or you'll be on your own, on the bus, in your little space, trying to kill the 9 hours it takes to get to the next city, whichever city it is." Following their tour commitments for the Blue album, Weezer spent 2 weeks in Electric Lady Studios to record some new songs on their own that were darker and more experimental than the first album. And just like that, to his bandmates' confusion, Rivers enrolled at Harvard to learn how to be a classical composer. However, it didn't take long for him to realize that studying contemporary classical music wasn't actually what he wanted to do. Rivers felt sad and lonely at school and began missing his life in Weezer. He would tell Much Music's Kathleen Rasp,
I was alone in Boston. It was very cold. I had no friends. And my leg hurt a lot because I had a terrible operation. So I was in a very strange state of mind. Plus I was taking narcotics. So...
You had a lot of time to think?
Yeah, a lot of time to think and be lonely. And then these songs were kind of like me wanting to come back to life and rock again and have fun and have friends.
While he was studying, Rivers was also writing music for Weezer's second album. The rest of the band focused on their other projects in this time, most notably Matt Sharp, who was ready to release his first album as The Rentals. During his breaks from school over Christmas and spring break, Rivers would reconvene at Sound City Studios in Van Nuys, California, to continue working on the album, eventually finishing it after he wrote his final exams. 2 months before Weezer released their next album, Rivers sent members of the Weezer fan club a rather troubling note, giving them a heads up of what they would hear on their next album. He wrote, "There are some lyrics on the album that you might think are mean or sexist. I will feel genuinely bad if anyone feels hurt by my lyrics, but I really wanted these songs to be an exploration of my dark side and all the parts of myself that I was either afraid or embarrassed to think about before. So there's some pretty nasty stuff on there. You may be more willing to forgive the mean lyrics if you see them as passing low points in a larger story. And this album really is a story, the story of the last 2 years of my life. And as you're probably well aware, these have been 2 very weird years." Weezer released their second album, Pinkerton, on September 24th, 1996. Named after the main character in Giacomo Puccini's Madame Butterfly. The album contained multiple references to the 1904 opera, as well as other parts of Japanese culture. While anticipation was high, the album wasn't initially received all that well. Critics were confused by the band's decision to go after what one called a sloppy and raw sound by producing it themselves, and the lyrics depicted a far more despairing and depressed side to Rivers' songwriting. in which he expressed thoughts about abstinence, sexual relations with a lesbian, and being pen pals with an underage girl, which loosely mirrored the actions of Madama Butterfly's Lieutenant Pinkerton, who weds a child and then abandons her. Rolling Stone noted that Rivers had a, quote, juvenile tack on personal relationships. He would tell Much Music,
First 4 songs are all like kind of pissy and whiny. Like it's so tough being a rock star, and I just want to be alone, and I don't want to have casual sex anymore. And then there was a year and a half there where I was very alone, and you got these songs, which are, I'm lonely, I want to have casual sex again. I want attention.
Weezer were kind of facing a bit of a backlash with Pinkerton. Singles like El Scorcho and The Good Life failed to catch on with radio or MTV, and in a year-end poll, readers of Rolling Stone voted Pinkerton one of the worst albums of 1996. Later in 97, Rivers would share his thoughts on the response to the album, writing, "This has been a tough year. It's not just that the world has said Pinkerton isn't worth a shit, but that the Blue album wasn't either. It was a fluke. I'm a shitty songwriter." Disappointed with the response to Pinkerton, Weezer finished touring in mid-97, and all 4 members went in different directions to focus on other interests. While no one claimed the band was over, in April 1998, Matt Sharp announced he was leaving Weezer so he could focus purely on his own music, namely The Rentals. He would tell the alternative press, "I don't really know how to speak on this because I don't know what should be kept private and what should be shared. I certainly have my view of it, as I'm sure everybody else has their sort of foggy things. When you have a group that doesn't communicate, you're going to have a whole lot of different stories." A few years later, Sharp would file a lawsuit against Weezer for breach of fiduciary duty, legal malpractice, and dissolution of partnership, declaratory relief, and accounting under the Copyright Act. He claimed that he had co-written 9 songs from Pinkerton, as well as Undone, the sweater song. The suit was settled out of court. Rivers returned to Harvard to continue his studies, but shortly after he dropped out to focus more on songwriting. He formed a couple of bands for fun. One was called the Rivers Cuomo Band, the other was Homie, both featuring bassist Mikey Welsh, who would soon replace Matt Sharp in Weezer. Soon after, Rivers left Boston for Los Angeles to get Weezer back on track, but things got off to a slow start. The band did play a couple of secret shows under the name Goat Punishment that consisted entirely of Nirvana and Oasis covers. During this period, Rivers became a recluse, painting his walls black and covering his windows while disconnecting his phone. But he was also writing songs at a prolific pace, compiling a reported 121 songs to bring to rehearsals. It wasn't until April 2000 that the band would reunite properly, but only because they accepted an offer to play the Fuji Rock Festival in Japan. But that gig proved to inspire Weezer to return home and go back into the studio to demo new songs. They also played more shows as Goat Punishment, as well as Weezer, including a string of shows on that summer's Vans Warped Tour. During a stop in Toronto, the band spoke to Much Music's Suk Yin Lee about what people could expect from their next album.
Just the sheer amount of money that's going to be spent on this record is just astronomical.
Yeah.
It's just beyond Spice Girl, beyond NSYNC. Those bands, forget about them. We got the budget.
You got the budget?
I'd have to say, we're going to outspend every band.
What are you going to have? String section, lots of backup singers?
About 6 or 7 different locations, engineers, consultants.
The Bahamas?
Yeah, we're talking about the NASA recording, yeah.
We're thinking about actually doing it on the space shuttle, some tracks, because, I don't know, it's never been done, I think we're going to do that.
So lots of money at your disposal to make a huge rock album.
That's true. Beyond any other rock album ever attempted.
Weezer returned to the studio, which was not a space shuttle, I might add, in December 2000 with upwards of 75 songs to work on. Once again, working with Rick Ocasek to try and recapture the glory from the first album. Rick came to them this time, and they recorded for 2 months at Cello Studios in Los Angeles. Unfortunately, their label Geffen Records wasn't too keen on what they heard, and the band decided to scrap some of the songs from the album. After the lukewarm reception to the deeply personal songs on Pinkerton, Rivers decided to focus less on his social life as a songwriting topic. He would tell Spin, "I wasn't really having the kinds of stereotypical breakup experiences, so I just ended up writing about other things." While Weezer were preparing to release their third album, a funny thing happened. Pinkerton began to build a cult following. In the years the band were out of the public eye, the album was being reappraised and discovered by new fans who felt the rawness of Rivers' lyrics, identifying with his emotional struggles. As a result, Pinkerton was being categorized as emo, a subgenre of punk and hardcore where vocalists express themselves through passionate confessional lyrics. But Rivers was still struggling to accept Pinkerton. In a 2001 interview with Entertainment Weekly, he called it one of the worst albums of all time, adding that everybody hated it. Critics, the majority of our fans, most of my friends and family, the other band members, everyone thought it was an embarrassment. It's a hideous record. It was such a hugely painful mistake that happened in front of hundreds of thousands of people and continues to happen on a grander and grander scale and just won't go away. It's like getting really drunk at a party and spilling your guts in front of everyone and feeling incredibly great and cathartic about it, and then waking up the next morning and realizing what a complete fool you made of yourself. Speaking to Much Music's Rachel Perry in what has to be one of the most awkward interviews ever, Rivers admitted he wasn't sure Weezer would ever return from what they experienced after Pinkerton.
My fear was that we would never actually get to make another record, and I'm just glad that we actually did it and put it out.
So you didn't think you would actually get around to putting out an album?
Well, it was looking pretty scary there for a while, honestly.
Why was it not looking like you guys were going to put out an album?
I don't know.
I mean, were you having difficulty...
I think if we knew that, it never would have happened, so...
Were you having difficulty getting new material together?
Having difficulty getting out of bed for a while.
But they did return. Released on May 15th, 2001, Weezer's third album was self-titled, like the first album and many albums that would follow. Using a similar concept as the Blue Album, the cover was a simple band photo on a lime green background, which helped it earn the name The Green Album to distinguish it from the others in the band's catalogue. The running time for the album was a brisk 28 minutes, led by a chugging first single called Hash Pipe that Rivers had intended on giving Ozzy Osbourne because of its drug-referencing title. Geffen didn't want to release it as the first single, but the band stuck to their guns. While the song performed well at rock radio and was nominated for High Times magazine's Pot Song of the Year in 2001, Hash Pipe was mired in controversy. BBC Radio 1 banned the song from airplay while MTV edited the song, replacing the word hash with pipe. Yes, that means that Rivers was now singing I've Got My Pipe Pipe. Another censored version of the song traded hash pipe for half pipe, which makes a little more sense if you can convince yourself the song's about skateboarding. In an interview with The New Music, Rivers said the censorship wasn't much of a concern for the band.
It doesn't really bother me that we get censored because I don't really care. It's not like we're on a mission to promote hash usage. So, I don't care. Call it whatever you want.
Right.
Hash pipe, half pipe, hash browns, it doesn't matter.
Rivers defended his transition from singing about his emotional turmoil to singing about psychoactive substances in an interview with the LA Times, telling the paper they're going to say he doesn't sing with any feeling anymore. He's not letting his feelings out. And the truth is, I miss that too. But all things considered, I think this is a stronger record. This record stands on its own without having to manipulate people's emotions. This record is on the anti-emotional extreme side, and I hope people stick with us because in the future, I will be going back and forth and probably finding some middle ground that makes us all happy. But not all songs on the Green Album shrugged off emotion. The album's next single would evoke some major warm fuzzies. Island in the Sun was the second single released from the album, though an early version of it was originally leaked online back in 1999, so diehard Weezer fans were already familiar with it well in advance. Much like Buddy Holly, the band wasn't planning to include Island in the Sun on the Green Album. Producer Rick Ocasek once again persuaded Weezer to add it to the album, and once again, he made the right call. The song wasn't an immediate hit. It did well on radio, but it paled in comparison to the success of the first album's singles and even Hashpipe. No, Island in the Sun was a bit of a grower. A few things helped, though. There were 2 music videos released for the song, the first directed by Marcos Siega and featured the band performing at a Mexican wedding. As endearing as it is, MTV wasn't really into it, so they decided to shoot another video. The second version saw the band reunite with Spike Jonze, who of course directed both Undone the Sweater Song and Buddy Holly. For his video, the band were shot interacting with several types of animals in the hills of LA. It really is an adorable video, I've got to say. While the animal video was totally adorbs to watch, according to members of Weezer, it was far from adorbs to shoot. Here's Patrick and Brian telling Much More Music's Karen Bertelson about the dangers of filming with animals.
You were almost attacked by a giraffe. Did you notice that?
No, that was me.
Did you know you were almost trampled by
That was
a
me.
giraffe?
Yeah, I mean, they were like, it was him, actually. Me, yeah.
What happened?
Giraffe was unhappy all day.
Everything was fairly easy. I'm not an animal person at all, so I was pretty nervous. I don't do well around. I'm scared of dogs, but big dogs, and
Can't run with the big dogs.
Poodle, you're not afraid of.
See, I'm afraid of the little ones.
Yeah, I am actually.
Because they want to bite you and then run away.
Regardless, everything was it was a lot easier than I thought it'd be. Playing with little lion cubs, and even standing right next to a panther that could take my arm off. He was very beautiful and seemed
cranky, though.
Seemed very sedate, like nothing was going to happen. There were trainers around. This giraffe, that we kept hearing this story of the last. Everyone's like, Spike, I can't believe you're using a giraffe for this video, because a commercial that he shot, he kept telling me stories about the trainer that was they used a giraffe in a Nike commercial, and the trainer had it around a rope. And what they do, they have a trainer with the rope, and then they
race it.
They race it, and they're extremely powerful animals, and they run. They just glide
cruise.
across the air.
It takes no time.
And their legs go out in 90-degree angles. They can kick. They can kick in 90-degree angles.
Yeah, like 6 feet out.
And they can kill a person with a kick. So this giraffe started taking off down the street. This was for the Nike commercial, and dragged the trainer along for like 3 city blocks and broke both of his legs. So
and I just let go. Whatever, dude.
Yeah.
That's fine.
That's
Go
a
do
good
your
point.
thing. I'm not doing this anymore.
So I had this fear installed into me anyway about the power of a giraffe. And okay, so you guys are gonna walk along. This is the last shot of the night. The sun's setting. We got to move fast here, and we just casually walk along. Just have the giraffe run beside you or walk beside you. And then it just
we had to follow it.
We had to follow.
You were in front of it in the tape.
We were in front of it. It was following us.
They edited that in though.
No, they actually used.
No.
How did it chase me then?
They can do that.
No, how did the giraffe, when we were doing it, chase me?
Well,
because
remember we did more than one take.
Okay, well, whatever was
You might be right. I might be
whatever
right.
was not used in the actual footage, we were walking ahead of it. It thought we were playing, maybe playing a game or something. It just took off towards us.
Yeah, it came close. Almost died for this video.
And I was that's it. I'm not doing this again. Like that. Like you can take a picture of us, take a picture of it. I'm not doing it. And he made us do it again. Somehow we did it again, and I think you see me running really fast. Like that was like right after I almost lost my life. So
To the 3,000-pound giraffe.
yeah,
It
but
weighed that much.
boy, does it fast!
Of course it's
It is
1,000
fast.
pounds. Probably does.
Yeah.
Damn.
It is so neat. It just kind of like jumps. It's effortless, and it's
so graceful and beautiful, and
you wouldn't know that was the most dangerous animal.
What was about it?
the big bear.
Oh, yeah.
6 o'clock in the morning, here comes this bear rolling down the hill, and the trainer's like, if he wants to go down a hill, I can't stop him. We're like,
I remember Rivers making a comment, man, what do you got to do to sell records these days?
I
And
know.
this bear's licking his head.
and here's how they get the bear to do something. They have this pan on a big big stick. It was got honey
sugar,
and marshmallows in it. They're like, Bam Bam over here. He's like, sugar. He put his head right here on me, like from behind. I heard him breathing in my ear.
It's in
like
the video.
he drooled all over me. It's like, oh my god, this crazy bear.
Live, the band were changing up the song, reworking the guitar solo, and for a stretch, Rivers was kicking off encores by performing Island in the Sun on his own with an acoustic guitar. One could argue that it was Weezer's concerts where the song really took off. The hip, hip bit that begins the song and appears in the post-chorus and outro became a fan favourite lyric to sing at shows. But perhaps the main reason why Island in the Sun kept getting bigger and bigger over the years is because it just kept popping up in various places. The song has become the most licensed track in the band's catalogue, likely because of its laid-back, feel-good vibe. Actress Emma Roberts covered it in the tween family comedy Aquamarine. In fact, she even released her version as a single. The song also appeared on TV shows like The Simpsons, Smallville, and even The Sopranos, and in the films Mr. Deeds, Boyhood, Trolls Band Together, and my personal favourite, Mary-Kate and Ashley's Holiday in the Sun. I'm sure my sister's got that on VHS still to this day. On top of that, it's also been licensed by cruise liners, which makes sense, and the Postal Service in France, which makes less sense. When he was asked by Billboard how the song came to be so popular, Rivers said, "The funny thing is, the song wasn't a real radio hit. I can only speculate that it's because the song has a cleaner guitar sound, which makes it easier for a more mainstream audience." Like every popular song these days, Island in the Sun also benefited from a TikTok boost. The song's become a Gen Z anthem thanks to the social platform, which has seen it used in any number of videos shot at the beach, looking to start some dance trend or soundtrack any number of silly, cute, or weird moments. And it's not just TikTok. On Spotify, the song's nearing the Billions Club with 300 million plus more streams than Say It Ain't So, Weezer's second most streamed track. But the band are doing their part in keeping the song fresh in everyone's mind. In 2019, the song gained headlines when a fan named Kira Laconetti posted a video of her brain surgery, during which she and the medical team performing the surgery sang along to Island in the Sun. Seriously. The singing actually helped doctors identify parts of her brain to avoid while removing the tumor. It was the lyric, "I can't control my brain," that stood out for Kira. And after the video went viral, Weezer messaged her on Twitter, writing, "Wishing you a speedy recovery, Kira. Would love for you to join us at one of the shows this spring. Shoot us a DM and we'll make it happen." Critical appreciation for the song's also grown. In 2023, Billboard published its list of the 100 best pop songs never to hit the Hot 100, and at a respectable 77 was Island in the Sun. For why it never hit the Hot 100, the publication noted it was appreciated more after the fact than in its time as an exemplar of Cuomo's pop songwriting. And licensed like crazy over the years, Island in the Sun was a bit sleepy for turn-of-the-century pop radio. And there you have it. Sometimes it takes a few decades to determine a band's biggest hit, as Weezer can attest. Hip, hip. I'm Myles Galloway, and that was the story of Weezer's Island in the Sun, on Encore, with new episodes every Thursday.
Encore is an iHeartRadio Canada podcast. Subscribe to this podcast on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts. Download the iHeartRadio app for more great podcasts just like these.